Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello everyone, I'm super happy to be here today, and I thank Christian and Alex again for really having me. And really the goal of my talk today is, I think, to get you all inspired, so I hope that works. You can tell me afterwards if it worked. So as Christian mentioned, I am an experience and service designer, and I get a lot of questions about what that is. A lot of people have heard about this profession mainly as UX design, because in digital this is really, really common. Like, people hardly ever tolerate, let's say, non-human centered spaces today, non-human centered digital products, like basically products that don't work. But I'm trying to bring this this approach to the built environment, and have spent the last couple of years working specifically in the hospitality industry. But I would actually like to maybe kind of get a show of hands from you. Who of you is like familiar with human-centered design, design thinking? Can I have like a few hands? Okay, good. Who's working in hospitality anyway? Any relate? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that's basically, that was like one half of you hospitality, the other half human-centered. Great. So just a really brief kind of introduction for those of you maybe not so familiar with experience design and what it does. Basically, experience design is about creating experiences for all people as holistic ecosystems. So from, you know, my work includes from like defining aesthetics of a space to like defining layouts and guest flows through the floor plan, down to creating strategies for digital products, kind of also working on wireframes, understanding what does this digital product need to be, and really everything in between. So everything that you as a user would be faced with, it's part of the experience design, and it's the task of experience design to really kind of create the whole experience as a holistic ecosystem. The second really important bit is, as Christian mentioned, creating products that are human-centered, which means pretty easily create products that respond to a need, or ease a pain, or kind of delight. So not just taking your ideas out of the blue, which is more like an artistic way to approach things, but actually grounding them in real needs. And then third, and most importantly, like actually a lot of my time is spent on trying to align different teams as well, similarly to Alex, and bringing them together, because in a product, especially in hospitality, it's a very complex system, and you have a lot of different teams working on different touch points. So it's very important as an experience designer to kind of bring all of these teams together in a collaborative environment. So that's quickly just why am I here at all, and what gives me the permission to be here today. And my kind of biggest projects over the last couple of years, or the ones you might have heard of, is Factory Berlin, where I basically helped to define the experience of a community member, and worked there for some time, helping community team, brand team, digital product team kind of create a united user journey and create different new touch points, which I'm going to go into later. And then my most recent project is this new boutique hotel living space, living concept. It's a hotel, really, but you know, it's kind of trying to push the Berlin hospitality scene, and this is like still a little bit undercover. I cannot reveal too much because it's only going to open at the end of next year, and this is in the west, so like near KaDeWe, between Bikini and KaDeWe. But I'm gonna give you some sneak peek of kind of some of the inside bits. So we're here basically today to talk about hospitality. And if I could get a few kind of ideas on what hospitality is, like what is hospitality in general as an industry, as a term. Any ideas? Any thoughts?
A warm welcome.
Yeah, correct. Any kind of spaces that are defined. Right, so.
I think of traveling, hotels.
Right, yeah.
Anything that I need when I travel somewhere.
Okay. So yeah, so that's basically the kind of I think that's a very historic approach to see hospitality and everything connected with travel, hotels, being a tourist somewhat, also kind of, restaurants, cafes, bars. However, what we are actually seeing today is that hospitality industry has spread really so much, especially, hotels, hostels, co-living spaces, Airbnb as well. That's like spaces for living is one bit. However, co-working is like a huge chunk of the hospitality market. And then workplaces, actually a lot of workplaces have borrowed from traditional hospitality approaches to basically make their experiences better, because they understood that there is this little nice bit about hospitality that makes people feel welcome. We have cafes, restaurants, etc., but also things like gyms and spas and, any kind of saloons you kind of go to where you are given a service. That's also part of the hospitality industry, and somebody thinks about your experience there or doesn't. And then, even stretching it further, and I hope we're going to be seeing more of this in the future, places like hospitals, education institutions, etc., they're all starting to kind of see people that come to them in a different way. And even though it's not specifically the hospitality industry, we start seeing trends in these spaces that are borrowed from hospitality. So basically, most of you are actually using the hospitality industry a few times a week or even a day. So that's something interesting to note, that it's actually much wider than just hotels. And I think it's really interesting to think about hospitality as, like, the classic definition is the art of receiving guests. However, the term itself derives from the Latin word hospice, which, not to confuse with the hospice, but basically hospice meant a host or a guest. But that word in turn derives from the Latin word hostis, which actually means a stranger or even an enemy. And basically the point I'm making here is that in hospitality, whenever you work in hospitality, it's very important to understand that being a stranger is fundamental to hospitality. So in one way or another, to be a guest, you have to leave a space that is your own, that you identify with, and you have to enter a space that is offered to you as a service. So in principle, a good hospitality service, product, however you call it, whatever you're running, is about making strangers not really feel that much of strangers anymore when they're using your product or a service. Like, in a nutshell, that's what most hospitality businesses are about, because people love to be taken care of. So I hope hospitality industry just never dies, because, yeah. So I know we're talking about human spaces, and as Alex mentioned before, any space is so much more than just walls. And a hospitality space, heavily quoting Grand Hotel Budapest, by the way, I find it a great example of a hospitality space, because when you think about it, it's not just the building, right? It's also the people who run it. It's also all about the food and drinks that you're served, and everything with the brand and the colors and how every single detail is aligned. It's also about scents and sounds and the digital products, which they didn't have, but in modern day, that's what it would be. And it's all about procedures, processes, and events. So when we're basically designing hospitality spaces, what we're designing is the whole ecosystem, and all industries, right? All teams have to work together in order to make it all seem like one candy, like one single narrative. So that was it on hospitality. I think it's pretty clear. Now, human-centered design in hospitality. Why do we need it? Why do we need it? Is because this scenario is so common, whether in hospitality or actually in many other businesses. It's just this difference in perspectives. It's not that somebody's wrong, it's just a difference in perspectives, and it's seeing the same thing from different sides. And the bit here is that in my work in the last couple of years, I most most of my work is actually aimed at trying to make clients kind of see what the users see and therefore make the product in a slightly different logic than they're used to. Just a couple of examples of like my favorite kind of like, so this is like the conceptual picture, and then like some real life examples that I've encountered fairly recently. So like anybody who has ever used a bathtub like that will know that it's like water all over and then maybe a wet bed, and that's like worst case scenario. In the best case scenario, it will be the storage for your luggage and your dirty towels. And this strikes me sometimes because, you know, this is supposed to be the expression of luxury. And there are so many different ways to express luxury in a more meaningful way rather than this kind of Louis XV style arrangement. Tugged beds. Who loves tugged beds? Basically, I don't know if, like, most people I've interviewed struggle with tugged beds, you know? Like, you really have to, like, pull it, and then all the sheets get untucked, and it gets really messy. And then when I was designing the experience for the hotel, I was asking, I was asking my operations people, you know, like, why are you doing this? Because the answers were, because that's the standard. That's the measure of quality. That looks professional. That's how we signal it's clean. However, I'm sure there are many more different ways to express standard, professionalism, clean, rather than doing something like that is so widespread, but it's actually so almost universally uncomfortable for most people. Which way should I go? Any guesses? Takers? Right? That way? I love this. We all want to digitalize everything. And I mean everything. Opening windows and all the light arrangement. My favorite is start, stop, and pose your shower remotely. This was actually they came and tried to sell it to us, how much of a luxury experience this is, and it's just extra steps in your life, actually. Which way to open water? Okay, this is like, you can look but don't touch, right? This is done by some of my favorite interior designers that I worked with. They are phenomenally talented aesthetically. Like, they create the hottest interiors around. But this actually came to my desk when they submitted a design, and I was like, this is the contestant for most painful shelf in the history of the world, right? And it's not because they are not talented or they are stupid, it's just because they don't think in the way that a user would be lying in bed. And then my kind of favorite one, this kind of luxury hotel where there's a kind of a sizable shower and a toilet, but there's no sink in the toilet. To go to the sink, you have to go all the way around, and that's the sink. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to correct that anymore because it was so late that the piping was already installed and we couldn't break any more pipes. So that stayed. And then when I was talking to the architects, why was it made that way? They told me, well, because we wanted this like really luxurious marble sink and we just couldn't fit it in the bathroom. And I'm like, you know, I think your guests are gonna care much less about the fact that the marble sink is there rather than about the fact that they have to go all the way around to wash their hands. So I hope I make a case for like, this is my daily life. And these are very talented people, very talented architects, like some of the Berlin's best people. It's just, I think architects, designers, but also project developers, business owners, sometimes, not often, a lot of people do this intuitively, but sometimes they lack the understanding, the tools and the mindsets to see the products that are being developed from the user's perspective, and this is why things like this happen. So I'm sure most of you have seen this, so I'm not gonna go kind of too much over that. I'm just gonna give you kind of some examples of how to avoid making these mistakes and the process that we take to kind of undo these little things. and then what kind of impact does that process have on products. So any project I start, we start with qualitative user research. So this is messy, this is time consuming, and most businesses think this is very expensive, and it is. But it allows you to not kind of, put an app on your shower. So when I was developing the hotel project, I've talked to over 30 people, from travelers, low budget, high budget, like people that travel almost on no budget, up to people who travel with like 700 euros a night budgets. And there was like hours and hours of raw data that we were listening to. And then basically what we were able to do, or what our goal was, that we were able to narrow down our target audience, and we were able to understand really intimately who is the person, like a fictional person, who's the group of people that we are actually designing this for, and what their needs are going to be. And we were able to create these persona profiles that you will see in action later on. So that's like the first step, is listen what your user, observe them living, observe how they eat their breakfast, how they, make their bed, how, if we're talking about a hotel, it's the same for a co-working space or any other space. Like, observe how your users are actually going to be using what you're going to be selling to them. And then the second one is, very importantly, so you get a lot of data, but then you have to make sense of that data, because you're ending up with hours and hours of talk, and then basically in a team, you sift through all those little quotes that will talk to you, and you start understanding that there are patterns. A lot of people start telling you very similar things, and you start seeing, okay, these are the themes and patterns that emerge, and this is from everything, from how it looks like, to the people, to products, to food, etc. And then basically what we did is we identified which insights are most relevant to us based on the kind of target audience that we defined for us. So we said that we would like to focus on what we call seeker of a space for living. So this is long-term travelers, basically, not somebody who's just there to sleep and gone, but people who are, looking for 2 weeks plus. And then we were able to identify what are some of the most valuable, like most needs with most weight to them. And for example, one of such insights can look like desire for a normalcy of a home setup. So we understood that when people travel a lot and for a long time, they have this almost like emotional pain for not having a home, and they're super tired of like white anonymous hotels. Everything looks the same, everything works the same, and they are almost allergic to that and go off into Airbnbs, even though they would prefer the convenience of a hotel, because it's, you're taken care of, but they don't do it because they can't. Like white bed sheets, I can't see that anymore. And that was really impactful for our whole product strategy in the end. Third bit is then like the messier one. This is where you understand, okay, so these are my insights. So how do I create different products or touch points around that? And how do I basically navigate this space? Like what could be now? What could be to solve this need or a wish? So you basically, this is the moment of like a lot of sketching, brainstorming, ideation, collaborating with a lot of teams. And then basically at the end of the stage, you come from what could be to understanding what should be, because you test and you kind of validate your ideas and you understand, okay, this is what should be. And you and your team are much more certain about it because it comes from so many steps before. And then the next step is like the most simple one, it's deliver, where you either create design assets or you communicate them to your executing teams. And this can look wildly different based on your project. So it can be a deck or a mood board or a brief, or like a user flow or user journey for your digital people. It can be really a lot of things. But basically this is the bit where you just summarize everything, package it up, and you ship it somewhere. So I bet like some of you are wondering like, okay, why would I spend so much time and effort and money. Yes, you do spend money on this. But as I say, I think it's better to spend money here, understanding how your product should be, rather than spending then the same money on marketing campaigns trying to sell a product that is hard to sell because it somewhere doesn't fit the market, basically. So some examples from the projects I've worked on, from like very soft or from like very kind of hard, you know, like design, layout, aesthetics, to more product strategy, and then down to like very almost like social design bits. So this is the hotel project I worked on, and some mood boards from that project. Basically, we had this insight that I mentioned before, that people on long-term travel, people who travel often, they have an emotional need almost. They are seeking a place that feels like home. So quite counterintuitively to a typical hotel industry, we've taken the decision to borrow heavily from residential interior aesthetics. So if you take like a hotel room and you like turn it outside in, you feel like nothing's gonna fall out because everything is stuck to the wall and everything is, you know, like rigid. And the decision that we decided to go with is to introduce more imperfection and more looseness into our interior aesthetics to give our long-term customers that feeling of home. It includes some more domestic textiles, yes, sometimes not so maintenance friendly, and we've had like quite a lot of work to do in order to make that also kind of feasible for the business, that you don't have to change it every year and you kind of design it. But there was, as you can see, this doesn't speak to this. These are not real, you know, this is not what's built, but this is the inspiration that went behind it, because unfortunately I cannot share with you a lot of these real images, but that's the inspiration that went behind it, and the kind of the final result is similar. It's very, it feels like, it looks like a home. And we can test it with our users, and the response was like, we told them, okay, which room are you gonna book? And a lot of people book based on, you know, price, location, but then how it looks like. And yeah, the response rate here was really high. Another hard example, so this is a conference facility that I helped to redesign, and we started with this. So the client was like, well, we have to see if this is gonna be rentable. Is there like a demand for this? Is this like gonna work? So we went and tested this with event organizers, but also like frequent event goers, like conference goers, and et cetera, et cetera. And basically what we found out that this is not gonna work. Why? Because it's too small and compartmentalized, and it's, even though this is like great for a meeting, the problem is that people don't really book conference facilities that much for such small meetings. Like the number of events when that would be booked is really small. And what people actually prefer is, just because events are all so different, everybody has their own needs. We discovered that what people actually prefer is like just a simple room that is nicely designed, that is very flexible. You can set up it with one big table, many small tables, whatever. And basically we were able to navigate basically from this to this, where we ended up with being able to book out this whole space as a single event facility for like mega big events. You can book it as a sequence of spaces because they all can be interjoined. So it can be, you know, this one with this one, or even if you want to have your pre-drinks and then the main bit and then break out again. And then we also did this bit where every event space has access to a breakout space, because catering is such a big thing. And many event goers seek for spaces that are allowing for this catering experience. And kind of rolling on that wave, we also introduced a show kitchen, because we understood that a lot of, at least our target audience, they're like cooking and kind of private dinners as a big event kind of typology. So we also introduced that into the floor plan. And most importantly, this little bit here, which we call the powder room. And the powder room was a very direct insight from event organizers. So basically from the people who are our clients who are gonna book the space. And the powder room is basically a place for them to change, put their makeup on, get their microphones wired, put their goodie bags, but also very interestingly kind of retreat once the event is like in a pause or over, because a lot of hosts told us that they're so overwhelmed they go into the kitchen because that's the only place where they can hide. And so yeah, we introduced this little powder room, and it's also like very elegantly designed. It feels like a real kind of jewel, and well, let's see how much money that generates next year. Two more softer things, kind of strategy. So I told you before that we were able to identify these different persona types, but what we also understood is that same characters have different needs based on the natures of their trip. So the same character of person, the same type of person, has different needs based on whether they're on a long trip or on like a short 1-2 night stay. So they have basically different mindsets. And what we did is that we made a different product segmentation in comparison to a typical hotel. So a typical hotel has your like economy, standard, junior, suite, you know, it's ranged by size and price, mostly. Sometimes views, sometimes other things, but mostly it's size and price. But what we understood is that sometimes that doesn't actually reflect. Sometimes you kind of overdo it for some users, for others you underdo it. So but what we did is we came up with these other 4 categories, which are not only tied to price and size, but also the different needs of users. So for example, people who are staying long-term have very different needs than people who are staying mid-term or short-term. So why, like, we don't need to put a kitchen into every short-term use apartment, but we should put a kitchen into every long-term use apartment. So kind of we went away from this very traditional kind of size and price to something that is more relevant for our target audience, let's say. Next one, this is a very simple one. This is from my time at Factory, where we had this very direct insight of like, okay, it's a community of 3,000 people. How do I find my relevant contacts? How do I find people I could work for, work with, my jobs? So, you know, this is really simple. We made a searchable database. Really easy. Why wasn't this done before? Don't know, whatever. But basically it's just as simple as that. It's a database that is searchable that allows you to search for these contacts and really find with keywords the people that you're looking for. Or also events and even like job postings. And then also another example from Factory is this one, where the insight was that it's very hard to find my community. And by that people meant that I come here and I don't really know where are the other developers or the other designers. Like, I don't really want to network to get a job, but I just want to, you know, share knowledge and not sit alone. And so basically, together with the Factory team, what we did is a bit of almost like social design, because this was not hard. Nothing here was hard. It was just about giving people the incentive and the inspiration to self-organize in what is now called circles. And circles are basically small communities of practice, and they're completely self-organized. They host events, and there are now over 15 circles at Factory. You know, you have blockchain circle, developers circle, IoT circle, etc., and they range between 50 and 300 members. So that's actually, you know, that's where you see kind of real life impact of this job. This makes me most proud versus the more like stylistic things. Right, so coming kind of towards the end, I just wanted to kind of finish on a high and give you maybe some inspirational thoughts about my experience from working in this for the last couple of years. I usually don't work with trends because I always go to the users and I tell them and I ask them to tell me what's their trend. But I couldn't avoid it to see that in the last 3 years, kind of at least, there are very clearly identifiable directions where a lot of people in different, both at Factory and in this hotel product, where different people kind of mentioned that in one way or another, so I just wanted to share them with you. Maybe that's kind of useful for your work as well. So, conscious, meaningful, experiential consumption. So I'm sure we've all heard this bit about people are really turning away from, you know, superficial, materialistic, blingy things. It's not so much more about how things look like, but rather what are the values that they stand for. Can this provide meaningful experiences? Is this sustainable? Like sustainability really goes in here. And yeah, some examples are, you know, the Sister City Hotel in New York that recently opened, who basically stripped down everything, and it's not very cheap, but they stripped down everything and created this basically very calm abode kind of in the middle of New York City, which basically only has what they believe are the essentials, which is a very good bedroom, a restaurant, and a hotel. And everything there is, all the room amenities they provide are sustainable, reusable, there's no plastic bottles, there are obviously bulk dispensers, you know, it's a very essentialist experience. And then another one I actually want to mention is our very own Michelberger Hotel in Berlin, that are rocking this for the last 10 years really, because what they have been able to achieve is to create a whole community around their hotel through experiences, through the incredible connection to the music industry that they have developed, and basically now, if you know, they're even developing their own farm where they're going to be growing the organic, self-made, local produce for their restaurant. And that's really nailing this meaningful, experiential. It's not so much about, you know, I want to have 10 plates of caviar selection on my plate, but it's much more about where does this come from? What impact does this have on the community and the place? And, you know, am I disrupting or am I contributing? Second, community and connection. This is an app called The Lobby, and it's by the Standard Hotel. And basically, bad example, but this is gonna stick with you. This is like Tinder for hotels. So, so basically what this allows you to do is it allows you to see who else is in a hotel, is in this hotel with you at the same time, and if you want to connect with them. It's not like relationship based, it's basically more to meet people, but they developed this because they understood that there is so much kind of traffic of connections going through their reception people that so many people are asking them, well, is there, you know, anybody, you know, who's that, or who's interesting, or like what's happening? They developed this app because solo travel is on the rise, remote work is on the rise. A lot of people arrive to a hotel in a new city, they know nobody. And this is really kind of solving that need. And then enhancement of overall well-being. So this, actually these pictures are just pretty pictures, but it's a shop, a store called Standard Dose, and it's the world's, I think, biggest CBD oil-based wellness space. And they have everything you want. They have your circadian rhythm lighting. They have meditation rooms. They have yoga rooms. They have a little cafe where they do tea ceremonies. They also have a CBD tasting kind of area where you can taste and like use all kinds of CBD products, from like, you know, the ones that you apply on the skin to the ones that you ingest. And basically this is a 3-story huge space, and it really marks this shift in people searching for spaces that are going to facilitate and help them with their overall well-being, mental, physical, emotional. So yes, essentially you would call it a shop, but this, like, the shop bit of it is like 20%, and the rest is all the bits that are kind of, you know, the yoga studio, the massage studio, the relaxation space. So yeah, their goal is to sell things, but they understand that they're not going to get anybody selling things if it's just a store. So I would highly recommend Googling this. It's really interesting, because a lot of people say this is what's coming in wellness and what's coming in retail, basically. And then kind of finishing on what's next, or what I think is next. and it's kind of rolling out of the store example, but I think what is coming more and more is hybrid spaces. And hybrid space is very simply just typologies of spaces that have not existed before. So not a hotel and not a co-working and not a gallery, but somehow everything together. And why that is because spaces like this, basically they take a target audience, they understand it very well, you know, like let's say remote working designers, and they really get it that these people want like a cool crowd and a cool restaurant and a hotel, but then also maybe they want some designer studios and artist studios to stay in, and then why don't we exhibit that as well at the space and make it all as a cultural hub? So Kazerne in Eindhoven, Netherlands does exactly that, and now even like I think they're 4 years existing now, they even have a Kazerne lab, which is where they invite designers and artists in residence to develop different innovative projects that tackle culturally or environmentally relevant topics. And I think this is based at least on the conversations with people I've had in the last year and with some kind of people that approached me, I think in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to be seeing more and more of these new typologies of spaces. And on that note, it's never the end because people love to be taken care of, and that's at the core of hospitality, and that's why I think it's really never gonna end existing. Thank you very much.